What administrative function coordinates all the moving pieces: budget, compliance approvals, PI narrative, institutional sign-off so a proposal is ready by the sponsor's deadline? A. Managing the overall proposal timeline, including internal and external deadlines necessary for a successful, on-time submission. B. Focusing solely on the sponsor's external deadline while ignoring internal review timelines. C. Assuming all proposal components will be ready simultaneously without active timeline management. D. Beginning timeline management only in the final week before the deadline. The correct answer is managing the overall proposal timeline, including internal and external deadlines necessary for a successful, on-time submission. Providing overall management of the application process, including both internal and external deadlines, is a defined research administration task, since a missed internal deadline can jeopardize the external submission regardless of how much lead time existed. An institution wants to allocate a portion of its centrally provided IT support cost to sponsored awards. What should be confirmed regarding this allocation approach? A. Assume centrally provided service costs can be allocated to sponsored awards using any convenient formula with no formal review. B. Charge all central service costs entirely as FA with no possibility of any direct allocation to awards. C. Assume cost allocation plans, once created, never need to be reviewed or updated. D. Confirm whether a proposed institutional cost allocation plan for centrally provided services, e.g., IT support to sponsored awards, has been reviewed and is consistent with uniform guidance requirements. The correct answer is confirm whether a proposed institutional cost allocation plan for centrally provided services, e.g., IT support to sponsored awards, has been reviewed and is consistent with uniform guidance requirements. A cost allocation plan for centrally provided services must be reviewed for consistency with uniform guidance cost allocation principles, not created using an arbitrary formula, assumed entirely covered by FA with no direct allocation possible, or left unreviewed indefinitely. A PI wants to add international travel to a budget that did not originally include any travel costs. What should be confirmed before processing this change? A. Assume adding an entirely new cost category is always permitted under general rebudgeting authority with no distinct review. B. Assume the addition of a new cost category is irrelevant to compliance as long as the overall award total stays the same. C. Confirm that a proposed budget modification to add a new cost category not originally approved, for example adding travel to a budget with none, requires sponsor prior approval, even if the total budget amount is unchanged. D. Treat the addition of a new budget category identically to a minor adjustment within an already approved category. The correct answer is confirm that a proposed budget modification to add a new cost category not originally approved, for example adding travel to a budget with none, requires sponsor prior approval, even if the total budget amount is unchanged. Adding an entirely new cost category not part of the originally approved budget is often treated differently and may specifically require sponsor prior approval compared to adjusting funds within already approved categories, even if the total award amount is unchanged. Under 2 CFR 200.308, which of the following actions by a recipient generally requires prior written approval from the federal awarding agency? A. Purchasing office supplies within the approved budget. B. Change in scope or objectives of the project, even if no additional funds are requested. C. Hiring a new graduate student at the previously budgeted salary rate. D. Submitting a routine quarterly progress report. The correct answer is change in scope or objectives of the project, even if no additional funds are requested. 2 CFR 200.308C requires prior approval for a change in the scope or objective of the project, regardless of whether there is an associated budget revision, because scope changes affect what the federal government agreed to fund. A study team wants to increase participant compensation partway through an active trial to improve recruitment. What should occur before this change is implemented? A. confirm whether the sponsor's terms require prior approval before an institution changes the IRB-approved compensation schedule for human subjects partway through an active study. B. Assume compensation schedule changes are purely a budget matter requiring no IRB involvement. C. Assume any change in compensation automatically constitutes undue inducement regardless of the amount. D. Implement the new compensation schedule and inform the IRB only at the next continuing review. The correct answer is confirm whether the sponsor's terms require prior approval before an institution changes the IRB-approved compensation schedule for human subjects partway through an active study. A compensation schedule change requires IRB review since it can affect the undue inducement analysis, not automatically constituting it before implementation, not treated as purely budgetary, assumed inherently problematic without review, or deferred to the next continuing review. What internal control documents the chain of required sign-offs? Compliance, financial, departmental before a proposal is submitted externally. A. Route proposals for approval only after they have already been submitted to the sponsor. B. Treat internal routing forms as a symbolic formality with no real bearing on submission readiness. C. Limit routing form use to proposals involving human subjects research, excluding other types. D. Prepare internal proposal routing forms documenting required institutional approvals before external submission. The correct answer is prepare internal proposal routing forms documenting required institutional approvals before external submission. Internal routing forms completed before external submission, not after, not treated as symbolic, and applicable broadly rather than only to human subjects. Proposals document the required institutional approval chain. A research administration office is asked to participate in an institution-wide committee reviewing conflict of interest policy. What is this committee formation process an example of within the general management body of knowledge? A. Financial reporting. B. Institutional service through committee participation. C. Subrecipient monitoring. D. Procurement. The correct answer is institutional service through committee participation. Serving on or forming institutional committees, such as a conflict of interest policy review committee, falls under the institutional service component of the general management body of knowledge for research administrators. What proactive step helps an institution coordinate its human subjects, animal welfare, export control, and financial compliance obligations under one structure? A. Develop a research compliance plan that addresses the institution's obligations across relevant regulatory areas. B. Rely on ad hoc responses to compliance issues as they arise. C. Limit the compliance plan to financial audit findings only. D. Delegate compliance planning entirely to individual PIs. The correct answer is develop a research compliance plan that addresses the institution's obligations across relevant regulatory areas. Developing a research compliance plan is a recognized responsibility that consolidates an institution's approach across multiple regulatory domains, rather than responding to each compliance area in isolation. A research administration office wants to assess whether its organizational structure appropriately supports compliance with an increasingly complex regulatory environment, for example, export control, financial conflict of interest, effort reporting. Which structural feature is most important to evaluate? A. Whether compliance responsibilities are clearly assigned to specific roles with adequate expertise and authority, rather than diffused informally. B. The number of potted plants in the office. C. Whether the office uses a particular font in its emails. D. The physical distance between the office and the library. The correct answer is whether compliance responsibilities are clearly assigned to specific roles with adequate expertise and authority, rather than diffused informally. Sound organizational design for a complex regulatory environment requires clearly assigning compliance responsibilities to roles with the necessary expertise and authority, avoiding ambiguity that can lead to gaps in oversight. Some award terms require sponsor notice or approval before any subcontracting, even for routine vendor purchases above a certain size. What should a research administrator confirm before executing a large vendor contract on the award? A. Assume vendor subcontracts never require sponsor notice regardless of award terms. B. Notify the sponsor only for subcontracts exceeding the full award amount. C. Confirm whether the sponsor requires notice before subcontracting any portion of the funded work, even to a vendor rather than a subrecipient. D. Treat all vendor purchases as requiring the same approval process as a subrecipient subaward. The correct answer is confirm whether the sponsor requires notice before subcontracting any portion of the funded work, even to a vendor rather than a subrecipient. Certain award terms impose notice or approval requirements on subcontracting generally, including vendor relationships above a specified size. So confirming the specific awards terms rather than assuming a blanket exemption for vendors avoids a compliance gap. A grants administrator reviewing a proposal notices the RFA requires the applicant organization to certify it is not debarred or suspended from receiving federal funds. This certification is verified by checking A. The Foundation Directory. B. The Federal Register. C. SIM.gov's exclusions records. D. RA Commons. The correct answer is SIM.gov's exclusions records. SIM.gov maintains the government-wide list of parties excluded, debarred, or suspended from receiving federal contracts and financial assistance. Institutions check this list to certify eligibility as required by federal award terms and 2 CFR Part 180. An administrator is helping a first-time PI understand the difference between a grant and a cooperative agreement referenced in an RFA. The key distinguishing feature is that a cooperative agreement A. Cannot include indirect costs. B. Is only used for construction projects. C. Requires no application at all. D. Involves substantial programmatic involvement by the federal awarding agency during performance. The correct answer is involves substantial programmatic involvement by the federal awarding agency during performance. For 2 CFR 200.1 and the Federal Grant and Cooperative Agreement Act, cooperative agreements are used when the awarding agency anticipates substantial involvement with the recipient in carrying out the project, unlike a grant where the agency's involvement is minimal. A proposal relies heavily on a specialized institutional core facility with known scheduling constraints. What proposal development task addresses this dependency? A. Assume any institutional core facility named in a proposal is automatically available whenever the project meets it. B. List a core facility in the proposal without confirming its current capacity or scheduling constraints. C. Confirm the proposal narrative addresses feasibility of the proposed timeline given the actual availability of any shared core facility or specialized instrumentation named in the plan. D. Assume core facility availability is solely the post-award operational issue with no bearing on proposal feasibility. The correct answer is confirm the proposal narrative addresses feasibility of the proposed timeline given the actual availability of any shared core facility or specialized instrumentation named in the plan. Confirming actual facility capacity and scheduling feasibility during proposal development rather than assuming automatic availability or deferring the issue entirely to after an award is made supports a credible, realistic proposed timeline. A PI's institution allows use of system-to-system S2 software to prepare and submit a grants.gov application rather than using Workspace directly. A key advantage of S2 submission is that it A. bypasses grants.gov validation entirely. B. allows institutional grant systems to integrate internal routing, budget, and compliance data directly into the federal submission package. C. eliminates the need for an authorized organizational representative. D. is required for all federal agencies. The correct answer is allows institutional grant systems to integrate internal routing, budget, and compliance data directly into the federal submission package. System-to-system submission lets institutions use their own electronic research administration software to compile forms and data, integrating internal routing and compliance workflows, and then transmit the completed package to grants.gov, still subject to the same validation and AOR certification requirements. What proposal review task provides an independent institutional check before a proposal goes out the door? A. Relying solely on the PI's own review with no independent institutional check. B. Conducting an internal review of a proposal before submission to check for completeness, compliance, and consistency. C. Conducting review only for proposals requesting funding above an arbitrary threshold. D. Treating internal review as optional when time is short before a deadline. The correct answer is conducting an internal review of a proposal before submission to check for completeness, compliance, and consistency. Conducting an internal review of a proposal, regardless of dollar threshold or time pressure, is a core proposal review task that provides an independent check beyond the PI's own preparation. Which task helps ensure a smooth single audit process across an institution's federal award portfolio? A. Wait for auditor requests before assembling any award documentation. B. Prepare for the institution's single audit by ensuring award records, reconciliations, and supporting documentation are organized and accessible. C. Assume single audit preparation is solely the responsibility of the Central Controller's Office with no input needed from award-level staff. D. Limit single audit preparation to only the largest awards by dollar value. The correct answer is prepare for the institution's single audit by ensuring award records, reconciliations, and supporting documentation are organized and accessible. Proactively preparing for a single audit, organizing records and documentation in advance across the full portfolio, not just the largest awards, supports a smoother audit rather than a reactive, request-per-request approach. A PI's proposal budget for Year 2 includes an escalation of salaries by 3 to account for anticipated merit increases. This practice is generally A. Prohibited by all sponsors, B. Acceptable when consistent with the institution's own salary escalation policy and the sponsor's guidelines, C. Only allowed for equipment costs, D. Required to be exactly 10 per year. The correct answer is acceptable when consistent with the institution's own salary escalation policy and the sponsor's guidelines. Applying a reasonable salary escalation factor across future budget years is an accepted proposal practice as long as it is consistent with the institution's documented salary increase policy and does not exceed any sponsor-imposed caps or guidelines. A PI's proposal includes a subcontract to a for-profit small business partner. When justifying the subaward in the proposal budget, the research administrator should ensure the documentation addresses A. Only the subaward's total dollar amount, B. The subrecipient's marketing materials, C. The scope of work, budget detail, and the prime applicant's basis for selecting this subrecipient, along with any applicable indirect cost rate, D. Nothing beyond a signed letter of intent. The correct answer is the scope of work, budget detail, and the prime applicant's basis for selecting this subrecipient, along with any applicable indirect cost rate. A well-documented subaward justification includes a defined scope of work, itemized budget, and rate information, negotiated rate, de minimis rate, or cost basis, giving reviewers and the prime institution's compliance office a basis to assess reasonableness and monitor the relationship post-award. A 4-year proposed project spans several fiscal years covered by the institution's negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, which specifies different rates for different future years. What should the budget preparation task confirm? A. Applying a single, current FA rate uniformly across all future years of a multi-year proposed budget regardless of a negotiated agreement's rate schedule. B. Assuming FA rates are fixed indefinitely once initially negotiated. C. Confirming a proposal reflects institutionally approved indirect cost rates for the correct fiscal years spanned by the proposed project period. D. ignoring the negotiated rate agreement's specified schedule of future year rates. The correct answer is confirming a proposal reflects institutionally approved indirect cost rates for the correct fiscal years spanned by the proposed project period. Confirming the budget applies the correct year-specific rates from the negotiated rate agreement schedule, which often specifies different rates for different future periods rather than a single current rate applied uniformly. It is necessary for an accurate multi-year proposal budget. In award negotiation, a program officer indicates that a proposed line item for foreign travel exceeds the sponsor's typical allowance and asks for a reduced budget before the notice of award is issued. This exchange is an example of A. Cost sharing, B. Award negotiation, C. Carryover, D. Rebudgeting after award. The correct answer is award negotiation. Award negotiation occurs between proposal submission and award issuance when the sponsor and applicant institution resolve budget, scope, or terms issues. Adjusting a budget line before the notice of award is a hallmark of this pre-award negotiation stage, distinct from post-award rebudgeting. After a notice of award is received and accepted, what administrative step formally sets up the mechanism for tracking project spending? A. Allowing the PVI to charge expenses to a departmental account indefinitely instead of a dedicated award account. B. Establishing the award account only after the first invoice is due. C. Entering the award's terms, budget, and account details into the institution's financial system to formally establish the award account. D. Entering award data manually without verifying it against the notice of award. The correct answer is entering the award's terms, budget, and account details into the institution's financial system to formally establish the award account. Establishing the award account and entering award data into the financial system verified against the notice of award is the foundational account management step that enables proper tracking of project spending against the approved budget. A research administration office manager is asked to lead a training session for new faculty on how to work with the sponsored program's office. Which approach would best serve this audience? A. A highly technical session using only regulatory citations with no practical examples. B. Skipping the session since faculty should already know the process. C. A practical overview of key processes, timelines, and points of contact, illustrated with real scenarios faculty are likely to encounter. D. A session focused entirely on the office's internal organizational chart. The correct answer is a practical overview of key processes, timelines, and points of contact, illustrated with real scenarios faculty are likely to encounter. Training for new faculty is most effective when it translates complex administrative processes into practical, scenario-based guidance relevant to their day-to-day interactions with the sponsored program's office. During award negotiation, the sponsor proposes contract terms granting itself rights to review and delay publication of results for up to 180 days. The research administrator's most appropriate action is to A. Accept the terms without review since the PI wants the funding. B. Sign the award immediately to avoid delay. C. Route the terms to institutional legal contract staff for review against academic freedom and publication policies before acceptance. D. Ignore the clause since it is unenforceable. The correct answer is route the terms to institutional legal contracts staff for review against academic freedom and publication policies before acceptance. Publication delay and review clauses affect academic freedom and intellectual property policy and typically require review and negotiation by institutional legal or contracts officials before the authorized organizational representative signs the award, especially for industry-sponsored agreements. A department administrator budgets equipment costing $6,000 as a direct cost and also includes it in the MTDC base for calculating FA. A reviewer flags this as an error. Why? A. Equipment can never be a direct cost. B. The FA rate cannot exceed 10 on any award. C. Equipment must always be treated as cost sharing. D. Equipment over 5,000 is specifically excluded from the MTDC base under the Uniform Guidance definition. The correct answer is equipment over 5,000 is specifically excluded from the MTDC base under the Uniform Guidance definition. The Uniform Guidance defines MTDC to exclude capital expenditures, which includes equipment meeting the capitalization threshold, commonly 5,000. Charging FA on such equipment overstates the institution's indirect cost recovery. Which institutional service task addresses the possibility of research misconduct, fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism being alleged within a sponsored project? A. Assume misconduct investigations are handled entirely by the sponsor with no institutional role. B. Limit institutional involvement in misconduct investigations to informing the PI of the outcome. C. Assume research misconduct allegations require no formal, documented institutional investigation process. D. Participate in a research misconduct investigation as part of the institution's process for addressing an allegation. The correct answer is participate in a research misconduct investigation as part of the institution's process for addressing an allegation. Participating in a formal, documented misconduct investigation is an institutional service responsibility. Misconduct allegations require institutional process, not one handled solely by the sponsor or resolved with only an outcome notification to the PI. An investigator on a PHS-funded award has a significant financial interest that the institution determines constitutes an FCOI. What additional consideration may apply depending on institutional policy and sponsor requirements? A. Assuming FCOI disclosures are always kept entirely confidential with no public reporting. B. Treating public disclosure requirements as applicable only to clinical trials. C. Assuming public disclosure requirements apply uniformly to all sponsors regardless of funding source. D. Reviewing whether the institution's conflict of interest policy requires public disclosure of certain financial interests for PHS-funded research. The correct answer is reviewing whether the institution's conflict of interest policy requires public disclosure of certain financial interests for PHS-funded research. Depending on the institution's policy and the specific PHS regulations, certain FCOI information may be subject to public accessibility requirements, distinguishing PHS-specific obligations from a purely internal, confidential handling of disclosures. A proposed study requires an online survey platform with specific advanced features, for example branching logic, HIPAA-compliant hosting beyond a basic free tier. What budget preparation detail supports accuracy? A. Assume the institution's basic free survey platform tier always meets the needs of any proposed study design. B. Budget for the platform's most expensive available tier regardless of whether those additional features are actually needed. C. Omits survey platform costs from the budget since online survey tools are assumed to always be free. D. Confirm that a proposal's requested budget for a proposed institutional survey platform subscription fee reflects the specific tier of features actually needed for the study. The correct answer is confirm that a proposal's requested budget for a proposed institutional survey platform subscription fee reflects the specific tier of features actually needed for the study. Budgeting for the specific tier that actually meets the study's needs, not assuming the free tier suffices regardless of requirements, over-budgeting for unneeded premium features, or assuming universal free access produces an accurate, justified budget line. Who typically has the authority to accept and sign a federal award on behalf of a university, legally binding the institution to its terms? A. The PI alone has full legal authority to bind the institution to award terms. B. No signature is required once the sponsor issues the notice of award. C. The institution's authorized organizational representative signs the award on behalf of the institution. D. Any staff member in the sponsored program's office may sign for the institution. The correct answer is The institution's authorized organizational representative signs the award on behalf of the institution. An authorized organizational representative, often in the sponsored program's office, has delegated institutional authority to accept and sign awards, since PIs generally do not have this legal signing authority. An institution's animal care facility loses its voluntary RACC accreditation, though it remains compliant with the mandatory Animal Welfare Act and PHS policy. What should be considered regarding sponsor awards? A. Assume RACC accreditation, being voluntary, has no bearing on any sponsor award terms if it lapses. B. Assume losing RACC accreditation automatically and immediately terminates all active animal research awards. C. Confirm whether an institution's animal facility accreditation status, e.g., RACC, affects sponsor reporting obligations if that voluntary accreditation lapses. D. Address an RACC accreditation lapse only if a site visit specifically raises the issue. The correct answer is, confirm whether an institution's animal facility accreditation status, e.g., RACC, affects sponsor reporting obligations if that voluntary accreditation lapses. While RACC accreditation is voluntary, some award terms or sponsor expectations may reference it, so its loss should be proactively considered for any relevant reporting implications, not assumed entirely irrelevant, treated as automatically terminating awards since WAF's policy compliance is the mandatory baseline, or addressed only if raised during a site visit. Our research office is building a RACC matrix for awards setup and finds that 3 different staff members are all marked accountable for entering award data into the financial system. What problem does this create? A. It is best practice because it ensures redundancy. B. It has no effect on process outcomes. C. It creates ambiguity about ultimate ownership, which can lead to tasks falling through the cracks or conflicting actions. D. It automatically speeds up the process because more people are involved. The correct answer is, it creates ambiguity about ultimate ownership, which can lead to tasks falling through the cracks or conflicting actions. A core principle of RACC matrices is that only one person or role should be accountable for a given task. Multiple accountable designations undermine clarity and often cause duplicated or missed work. How many did you get right? Let us know in the comments, and tell us what topics you want us to cover next. Want to practice more? Download the app and get hundreds of free practice questions with detailed explanations.